I'm very excited about this topic because I just have the fondest memories of Mr. Foster in Audubon. And so I'm really looking forward to learning more about this culture and what Linda and Nancy have to tell us. Quickly, they have great resumes. They are both graduates of JMU programs and very active in the Augusta County Historical Society. Linda taught in the public schools in Augusta County for over 40 years, and she also has museum experience with the Frontier Culture Museum and the Woodrow Wilson Presidential Library, among other things. And Nancy is also a very prolific writer and historian, and you may have actually read some of her hiking series in the Daily News Record. Maybe you've gone out on a trail. I learned that what did I learn about the Paul State Forest? It used to be called Paul's Forest. Yeah, I learned something myself, always. And she has a publishing business, and there's so much more they could talk about themselves if they feel like it. But we want to hear about the general stores. So who's going first? Okay, well, let's give them a warm welcome.
It's like the Lucy and Ethel show, okay? This started, we just figured out 36 years ago, and because at Frontier Culture.
The Frontier Culture Museum.
Yep, and they, when I would go into schools, kids were always, no matter what we showed them, they'd say, how much does that cost? And we went, well, what a great question. You know, that's what teachers do. And then Nancy and I said, wait a minute, we should do a program. And so I'm not sure if they were like trying to get rid of us. And so once a week, we would go to Richmond because that's where all the research was back in the early 1990s. And boy, did we find a treasure trove. So we did a program and it was very successful. Well, then our lives went on. And then when I retired and went to Presidential Library, they got a grant and they said, we need to do a program about buying patterns and, you know, general stores. And do you know how to do that? And I was like, oh yeah, we can help you out. So between the two of us, we, you know, have found out some items about general stores. Now, most of ours are in Augusta County, and Rockbridge, but Nancy has gotten really close to Rockingham County as well. But we want to train you by looking at some of these photos. Like the next time you go down Route 11, you're going to go, oh, that used to be a general store. Or on 33, wherever you are, you'll be able to see them. So, yes, ma'am?
I was just going to say.
And what you did.
Yeah, so as Linda said, our life after the Frontier Culture Museum, which ended last century, continued in the history field in multiple ways. And one of the ways that it continued for me is that I'm an independent historian, and I've worked a lot with different organizations, and I've curated several exhibits at the Brownsburg Community Museum in Rockbridge. And one of those exhibits was Cradle to Coffin, the country store, and that turned into an exhibit that opened during the pandemic and stayed there for several years. And this is the exhibit catalog from that, which is for sale afterward for $15 if you're so inclined. But you'll see a lot of the pictures that you'll see here are in here, and a lot of the information that you're going to hear from us, you don't have to take notes. There will be a test afterward, but you don't have to take notes because it'll be an open book test.
Yeah, well, we were both teachers, you know, so there always has to be that pop quiz. But anyway, to get started, just think about, where do you all go up in your beautiful area here? Where do you all go to get medicine? Just think. I know some go to Walmart, some go to Walgreens. Everybody goes someplace different. Where do you go when you need a little of that cold hard cash? You know, bank. Where do you go? There's this thing called, you know, letters and postage and all. We used to do that, you know. And so some of you have to go to the post office too. What do other things can you think of, Nancy?
Well, what about if you have a horse and you want to get some horse feed?
Mm,
Or where would you go? Farm Bureau, probably.
right.
Or then the kids are getting ready to go to school, so they got to get their new textbooks. Where would you go for those?
Mhm.
Or it's 4th of July or Christmas and you need firecrackers.
Mhm.
Where would you go for those?
I know, or you need flour, or sugar, or coffee, or cheese,
Or Santa needs help with
Yeah.
some things for
and
Christmas.
molasses.
Or you know, your socks need darning.
Mhm.
So where are you going to get some thread for that?
That's about a whole day of errands for all of us in here. But back in the 1850s, you only had to go to one place, the general store. And as, like I said, after you see this and you're driving around, and hopefully, I know we need the rain, but hopefully it'll be a nice sunny day and you're driving around and you're like, oh my gosh, look at that. Look at that porch. Look at those windows. That's a general store.
It's
So,
also called the internet. Don't let the kids tell you that before there was Amazon, they couldn't get things.
mhm.
You'll see that they could get maybe a wider variety of things at the general store.
I know, and right off of, I just saw this, right off of 33 going toward the mountain, a former student called and he said, do you know anything about general stores? And I went, yes, a little. Why? He said, I just bought an old one. I said, you did? What are you going to do with it? He said, I'm going to turn it into an Airbnb, and it is gorgeous. So, I mean, they are still around today. So, all right, I'll switch with you, Ethel, Lucy, whichever one you are.
All right, so we'll just jump into it.
Yeah, we'll jump right in.
Might as well sit down. I'm going to be a little.
All right, you're going to be a while.
All right, so that's the resume that we already told you about. Okay, so, and we've already talked about where you get all these different things. But let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to the early 1700s when Rockingham was part of Augusta County, and this was the Wild Wild West. And so, but despite the fact that this was a pretty remote area, the roads were really just paths, animal trails or Native American trails that you maybe could get a horse on, maybe a two-wheeled cart, but not really much beyond that for a while. You'd think that we had this in our imagination that we were this remote, everything self-sufficient backcountry, and that was absolutely never the case. We were always connected, maybe not as fast as the internet today, but we were always connected to the bigger cities to the east. And so trade went out, trade came in. And what we had, and our connection at that time in the early 1700s, Augusta County was formed in 1738, became actually a governmental entity of its own in 1745. And Rockingham didn't get broken out from that until 1778. So the first known, I'm not going to say the first store, but the first known store that we have documented opened in Stanton in 1748. So, but even before then, the trade went back and forth. So maybe you take your cattle to market, and where were you taking them to market at that time from here? You were taking them to Philadelphia. So you go to Philadelphia and you sell your cattle, or you sell your grain that you've grown, and you've got a little bit of cash. So maybe a little bit extra, you buy a few nice things, so maybe some nice china, some pretty bows, some pins, some spices, and you bring them back, and maybe you bought more than enough for your family, and so you sell the rest. And so the first traders that came through, the first general store were peddlers, itinerant peddlers that came through. And very quickly, the itinerant peddlers bought a house and settled down and opened up, in their house. The front room was a showroom. I got extra things from my trip to Philadelphia. Let's sell them. And so general stores just happened. And so in actuality, it wasn't that a village happened and then a general store. In many cases, it was a general store happened and then a village happened. And so, I mean, this just grew and grew and grew until it was literally the everything store. By the mid 1800s, so 1850s, there were in Virginia 2,736 retail stores in Virginia, and the majority of those were just country stores, where you could buy everything you wanted, and they advertised. They advertised. The name of that exhibit that I talked about was From Cradle to Coffin, and literally everything you needed could be purchased there. And then as the stores grew and the merchants grew, they would go on buying trips. They would go up to the bigger cities. Philadelphia, of course, at first, then later Richmond, Baltimore, Alexandria, and even later on to New York City. So they would take goods from here that they had bought from the local population, chickens, eggs, cheese, meat, ginseng, furs, and then they would sell it up in New York or Baltimore and or barter it and bring a lot of fine store-bought goods back. So we're gonna intersperse this talk with lots of pictures of general stores. They're all different, they're all crowded and full of people and things, and the more you look at them, the more things your eyes will pick out. But this was downtown Greenville. You'll see advertisements, you'll see people doing lots of things. So the general store not only bought goods and sold goods, it actually was all these other businesses that Linda was talking about, all rolled into one. The post office was a huge one. More often than not, at least one store within, and these little villages, like Mount Crawford, would have had a half a dozen general stores. It wasn't just like there was one store. And the post office might move from place to place whenever somebody got the appointment. But you also, the post office was where you did money orders, where you got your mail, picked up your mail, and you can see that this is a general store in southern Augusta County, Moffat's Creek. It was a store, it was a post office, it was a bank, it was a place of gossip. This is the inside of that store. Look at what's in there, everything. And these stores would have been, for us walking in, I think it would have been a sensory overload. They would have been just full of colorful things, a kaleidoscope of items. Every time you look, you're going to see something new. But just think about the smells. A barrel of molasses, a barrel of vinegar, cheese, coffee, animal feed, and of course, in the wintertime, smoke, wood smoke or coal smoke, and that you would be smelling. So it would be just an overload of senses. This is just one story of tiny stories. The little town that I didn't even know this existed. But when you create a post office, you have to have a name for the post office, right? So some place for people to send it. And so people would just, we're doing all right, let's open a store in their house. They open a store, let's apply to be a postmaster. And so from 1894 to 1910, the Carwells in the little blink of an eye near Frank's Mill in Augusta County operated Zeta. Those are their certificates given by the post office department that they became the postmaster and postmistress of Zeta. And you can see there's a postmark to Zeta, Virginia. These people hadn't brought this into me with the picture of their house and everything. I would have never known that there was any such thing as Zeta. The town of, I don't know if anybody's been to Middlebrook, Virginia, but it's on the Brownsburg Turnpike. If you go from Stanton to Brownsburg and then out to Warm Springs and Hot Springs, this was a major early turnpike. Middlebrook was a prosperous little village. There were at least 6 or 8, at any one time, 6 or 8 stores in Middlebrook that all thrived. So this was Russ Meisel's in Middlebrook. And let's see. So Russ Meisel's, I was able to pick up at auction a few pictures and a couple of ledgers, a couple of ledger pages from Russ Meisel's. This is the interior of the store in the 1890s. You could hardly get through the store, but you can see there's open bags of things. This is just for sale. When you read down through there, there's just, I mean, just everything. I know here is some of the storekeepers. They bought eggs, butter, meat, furs, wild game, ginseng, garden produce, and various nuts were among the items they bought and bartered. I have a list. Let me see. I know I've got a list in here of some of the things. Okay, here's a store. This is that store today. It's the Middlebrook Public Library. And you can see that the shelves of the store there became good library shelves. But here's another store, pages from a store in the 1920s in Brownsburg. And just random pages. This is what I pulled from the pages that they sold. Long underwear, suspenders, shoes, pineapples, bananas, raisins, grapefruit, soft drinks, fireworks, oil, beef, candy, nails, thread, cod liver oil, sugar, matches, salmon, hose, liver, hose like for your garden, but they probably also sold hose like for stockings. Liver pills, coffee, soap, rivets, linoleum, bread, cheese, paper, seeds, and fish hooks. So here's another local store. This one is really interesting. This is right on the railroad. You can see the railroad right there, Lofton, Virginia. And I don't know how long this store operated, but we have the ledgers in the Augusta County Historical Society from the 19-teens to the 1950s. And the ledgers, we don't have all the ledgers because I'll talk about this in a minute, but they had a very complicated bookkeeping system. But these are the general ledgers of the things they sold every day. And so you had that daily ledger, and you also had a ledger of your customers. So you would have had a ledger for Linda Petzke. She would have had a page for things she brought in and things she bought. And then you would settle up once a year on that. So this is the Lofton store or Ramsey store because the Ramseys ran it. And so if someone came in or sent their child in with a note, said, I need some snuff, or I need some lard, that little sheet of paper would just get stuck in the pages. So I was able to track some of the customers and find out their pictures and then kind of and find out their story. So this is April 2nd, 1942. Mrs. Ramsey, will you let me have $2 until the 15th? And obliged, Mrs. J.J. Harvey. J.J. stands for Jesse James. She was Mrs. Jesse James Harvey. And so that's another point that I want to make is the general store was the bank. If anybody had money in a cash poor society, it was the general store. And so it was, you would go and borrow and come back, borrow and come back. And so she was asking for $2 until the 15th. Well, why would you need $2? Well, a lot of times, so if the circus was coming to town and the circus cost a couple of dollars to take your family, you might go to the store and get I've seen this, just borrow a couple of dollars to buy circus tickets. Or maybe she had to buy some, go to see the doctor or something and owed some money. So this is that's the Lofton store. Now, this is an interesting thing. So I said it served as the bank, now, particularly once you get into the Depression. And this probably really happened. I don't know that there's any, I don't know what y'all have in your archives here. You know, got a lot of general store ledgers, but I think it'd be fun to look at in the 1930s, 1940s, in the general store ledgers, because what showed up in Lofton was they were cashing a lot of relief checks, and they were cashing a lot of, Lofton was really close to a CCC camp, and they were building the Blue Ridge Parkway, just really close by. So a lot of these people were cashing their checks from building the Blue Ridge Parkway. So these whole pages are just cashing a check, and I bet with Shenandoah National Park happening, I bet that, and with the CCC, there was at least 2 CCC camps, because you all had one in Grottoes, and you had one in, what were we talking about, out in Timberville? Yeah, so I bet if you look at general store ledgers in that area, you might see people cashing CCC checks. And so this was the same Mrs. Jessie James Ramsey. She, on October 26, 1939, she sent her child with a little note that said, Mrs. Ramsey, send me a box of snuff, a dozen eggs, 3 quarts of oil, fly spray, can of beef. Now, where would you go and buy all these different things in one place? A loaf of butter bread, and it was a whopping 82 cents. But this is also the Depression, 1939. And here's another one where she wanted a loaf of bread, 2 boxes of salted ham, a dozen eggs, a can of salmon, a box of baking powder, half a pound of cheese, a box of macaroni, 3 pounds of sugar, 2 pounds of lard, a box of senso, which is soap, and 1 cake of toilet soap. And at the end, crackers. So stuffed into that ledger were all these advertisements from the different brands that they sold. So Morton's salt, when it rains, it pours. Silverware, you can get your whole silverware set for 59 cents. And obviously the general store was a gathering place. I just love looking at these pictures. The one on the right, if you look on the very first picture I had, but if you look there, this was a 2-story store. Look all the way on the right, those are chicken crates, you know, and so they were buying and selling chickens from people. There's also some chickens underneath, I think, running around. Okay, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, because this was, when I said this was the Amazon of the 19th century, I don't think I was really exaggerating. I think you could get so many things at the general store from all over the world. This is an 1820s kids geography book, elementary school geography book, of where you get different countries that are represented in the general store. There are 25 different countries represented here. Sri Lanka, which is Ceylon, Spice Islands, ginger. I mean, look at that. Jamaica,
France,
South America, West Indies, 25 different countries. And it was so much that you could get in the general store that it became a lesson in a school book. So don't tell me about Amazon. Now this one is almost in Rockingham, so we're going to count it. This is in New Hope, and it's the Crawford Wilberger store, and they actually were it was a huge store. You see that? That's a 2-story building. I'll show you a picture inside of it in a minute. So much so that they spun off. They had a funeral home business right next to it. They also had the whole section was just shoes. So they went into shoes big time, but they were on the railroad. They were shipping things to the big cities on the railroad. When we went in, the store hadn't operated for a few years, and they called us and they said, we got just a bunch of junk here. We're going to throw it away unless you take it. So we got a box that had a wire sticking out of it and just papers stuck on it, skewered on it. And that was, and there were like 2 boxes of that with papers skewered. So I went out on our back deck on a day that wasn't windy and pulled them all out and organized them, pulled them off those wires. And it was the daily receipts and everything. And somebody would come in, they'd buy something, they bring in eggs, get stuck on there. And then another one of things where they ship them on the railroad. So this one goes over here. And then others were where they had purchased something from, they go on a buying trip and they purchased from different places. So this is the interior of the first floor of the store. It is huge. I compare that to the one you saw in Middlebrook. This is like 4 times as big. This was a big operation. And the upstairs was all storage. This is where they were buying from. They would go on trips every year and buy from the Baltimore Bargain House. So that gets me to another item that the country store brought to us. From the 1700s to the mid 1800s, if you went into the store and you purchased something, there were no brands like we know it now. You would go in and they cut a piece of cheese off the wheel that was there, or they reach into a barrel and pull out some crackers, stale crackers. Or they would, once kerosene became available, around and just after the Civil War, they'd just go and you want a half a gallon of kerosene, you go into the tap and get it out. And then if you bought something, they'd wrap it up in a paper. They might even figure out how much you owed, write on the paper and write it in pencil and tie it with a string, and that's what you got. And then in 1898, the National Biscuit Company said, we think people are tired of stale crackers. And so instead of having crackers in a barrel and naming a restaurant after it later, let's seal them and put them in a box, just a family size, that are sealed for freshness. And we're the National Biscuit Company, so we'll call ourselves Nabisco. And they were really the first ones who hit the brand and started brands. Although seed companies actually started that a little bit earlier, and Rockingham had a seed company by the mid 1800s that was selling garden seeds. And so those actually seed companies kind of hit the ground running with brands first, and then Nabisco, and then I'm trying to think of who were some of the others that followed pretty quickly afterward. Kraft cheese. So that's the end of the cheese wheel in a lot of places. But the craze that really pushed the brands was tobacco. America was tobacco crazy, and some people chewed it, some people smoked it. Get these numbers. At one time, like about 1900, there were 12,000 tobacco brands just for chewing tobacco. 12,000. And for smoking, there was 9,000. Can you imagine? But then there were also things like ONT Clark's, which stands for Our New Thread, for spools of thread. And so brands started popping up. And nothing, so here's some brands. Here's a store, Mossy Creek, right again on the border. Second story or 2-story, maybe the family lived in the second story, or maybe it was used for storage and they lived next door. Some more brands, rubber heels for your shoes, pig rings. You can't get that at Walmart today, I don't think. Here's a store. So once you started getting brands, they would hang up, and it'd be like flags going across the store. Hang up all these different brands and put them in the windows. You get for the tobacco, you get the Indian cigar statue that was out front of a lot of them. But nothing says advertisement and brands like patent medicines. Now, the FDA was not even a glimmer in anybody's eye. And so patent medicines, it sounds like the patent is, like a patent, that's some kind of regulation. But that's not the case. Patent means I have a secret recipe that you don't know about, and it's going to cure everything that there is. And there were thousands, at one time, 10,000 different patent medicines that were being sold. Now, in the 1800s, even the early 1900s, if you got sick, something ailed you, you may or may not go to a doctor, but you did go to the general store and you did buy something for it. I'm going to pass some of these around just so you can see. I've got some of them. Don't drink any of them. Some of them still have things in them. This is mange medicine for humans and as a treatment to cleanse your scalp, and also for dogs if they have mange. Yeah. Don't use it. Spirits of turpentine. Now this is Dr. Height that I'm going to talk to you about. Spirits of turpentine for internal use. Consult your physician, but we'll pass that around. Linda can pass. Now let me tell you about Dr. Height. And I think the doctor was his own designation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he had any medical training whatsoever. He started in southern Augusta County, and he started mixing his patent, his secret recipe that was going to cure everything. The great national remedy, what it is, what it does. And you can read there everything that it will cure: pains, cramp, flux, diarrhea, cholera. It goes on and on, pneumonia, exhaustion from fever, etc. Spinal meningitis, paralysis, it does it all. Toothache, insect stings. So he became so popular that he moved to Stanton and set up his laboratory.
And you can still see his name there on the building
yes,
today.
The building, and then he became even more popular, and he wound up down in Verona. Here's some more. Jaeger's liniment. Some of these are just brand names that are kind of harmless, Band-Aid things, but Hogshead. Some of these secrets. Yeah. You do those? The interesting thing is, Dr. Height went down to Roanoke, and he died in his early 70s in a sanatorium from a nervous ailment that is cured and cure. But let me tell you what. Here is somebody they have actually taken his recipe and analyzed it. It was 65% alcohol, and it contained camphor, ammonia, turpentine, and various herbs. So, which is safer than some of the stuff. Some of these patent medicines contain strychnine. Now, during the 1918 influenza crisis, which I was an interesting bit of history. Y'all may not know this, but Penny knows this. I was scheduled in March of 2020 to do a talk here on the pandemic of 1918. And it got canceled because of the pandemic of 2020. But I was gonna talk about the pandemic, not with the pandemic with the general store, but the pandemic created a run on these medicines, and the advertising in the newspapers is just amazing. You had to buy formaldehyde candles to burn, but the pandemic, the deadliest week in American history came in October of 1918, when 2,700 Americans died in battle, and that was right at the end of World War I, and 21,000 civilians died that week from the influenza pandemic. So So the general store, there was a run on the general stores. Now, they wouldn't sell soda anymore, but they would sell the formaldehyde candles and the strychnine that you could take and die before you got the flu. Another interesting thing was thinking about African Americans and how the African Americans worked into the general store. Of course, before the Civil War, when you had a small free black population and a large enslaved population in the valley, the enslaved people show up in the general stores. They show up as in, like Linda's Joe. And so they had their own accounts, and they had objects that they bought and sold. They sold craft items that they made and sold produce that they brought in. So they actually were part of the economy. After the war, there were some stores that were open that were run by African Americans. This one is a very successful one in Lexington, Virginia. And there were stores that operated mostly by white owners, specifically for African American clientele. And it was very uneven as far as how they were affected. And there were some places where African Americans got inferior service. They were not allowed to buy things that were above their status, and other places where it was equal. But the interesting thing is, the demise of the general store was also the rise of economic freedom for the African Americans, because part of the demise of the general store was the Sears and Roebuck catalog. They came in the post office in the general store. But the Sears and Roebuck catalog is colorblind. The Sears and Roebuck catalog doesn't know if you're black or white when you're ordering something. So you can order whatever you want and nobody knows. And the population of business owners who own general stores got so upset about this in places that they started a conspiracy theory that Sears and Roebuck were actually African American. So much so that they had to publish photos of themselves to prove that they were white men. So that was part of the demise of the general store. The other part of the demise of the general store was this thing right there, called the automobile. So you can get in the store, you don't have to go to Middlebrook or Folks Run to get everything you need when you can drive into Harrisonburg. And you had huge department stores, and you can get things right at you can go on a buying trip yourself on the railroad. So the car was the other thing. America fell in love with the car and the Sears and Roebuck catalog, and those two things, increased mobility, helped end it. So that's kind of my end of it. Now Linda's going to take you on a deep dive into.
You can hold that because I got to get up.
You want me to change it?
Well, no, you can leave it right there
Okay.
now.
Uh-huh.
But heck yeah. So see, now you know what to look for. You've taken a look at the exterior and some interiors of general stores. We've seen the porches so they can gossip and get all the latest news. We've seen the big windows. A lot of times they were second stories, and those were either, as Nancy stated, where they lived or storage for them. And, got to have that hitching post for the horse you came in on, as they like to say. So when I went to the Presidential Library, what they really, really wanted was a look at Stanton stores, and then if we could find them, and we did, rural stores, and just compare them. And so most of what we used to get our prices in 1854 was a store called the Bickle Store, because we had their ledgers, and their ledgers were so nice and neat. And it was part of a collection that we have at the Historical Society from the Hamrick family. The ledgers were spanning from 1853 to 1857. And so you'll notice, and what we loved about this, and even though downtown Stanton, even back then, they had so many different general stores back then. But this one we liked because it was sort of a who's who in downtown Stanton. This is where all the lawyers were going. So good picture of the ledger that we worked with. You can see the outside of it, not so great, but inside, and you'll notice the numbers to the side. That was their like customer number. That told them a page when, at the end of the day, when he, Mr. Bickle, goes back into the day book, he only has to go to page 209 and he can write down how much money was spent that day. And as Nancy mentioned, most of the time it was on credit and you paid it off. For Mr. Bickle, he liked to be paid twice a year. He liked to be paid after, near the end of the year when you had butchered. And he also liked to be paid in the spring when some of the crops have come in. So he really liked, so we believe that Mr. Bickle was making 2 buying trips. And we do know he was going mostly to Baltimore to do his shopping. This is the interior of the Bickle store. Again, you just look at it, immediately you get those smells in your, I mean, you can probably imagine that, well, the cheese you were talking about. I always think of the seeds and the candy. And the reason there's a big blue mark, that is Mr. Bickle. And this, even though the ledgers only go until 1857 or so, the store went for a long time. The Bickles also, I don't know what it is. You were talking about the Wilburgers. The Bickles also go into the funeral business as well. So this is what the store, we got this from the fire records. And according to the Stanton Fire Insurance, it was a 2-story building. It had brick walls and a tin roof. And its value in 1850 was $1,800. So, and Mr. Bickle believed in advertising. Stanton had 2 newspapers, and so he was constantly advertising and definitely letting people know when something new came in. Apparently, we only saw one time. They were always getting coffee in, they were always getting tea in, but only one time in the 3 years that we looked at did they get green tea. And then if you look at their book, everybody's buying it. They were sold out of it within a couple of weeks. So I don't know, maybe Mr. Haidt thought that there were like good vibes in that green tea. I don't know. So how this all worked, if you can see this, you would go into the Bickle store, and as Nancy's already described to you, you tell them what you want, they get it for you. They're going to wrap it in the brown paper with the string, and then they're going to write on the outside of it. Now, the one thing that is just amazing is the number of different people that go and shop for just one person. For example, in case you want to know who shops the most, it is people from, right here, David Fultz. Now, Nancy, bless her heart, found out that David Fultz was a judge. But notice here, it says, they always write per, P-E-R, that's going to tell you who's doing the actual shopping. And so here, it looks like it says Irishman, or the one above it says self. Some of the different names that come in, I went through every ledger that we had today just to get you some of them. They might say self, mother, lady, son, girl, daughter, boy, or servant. And occasionally, they will use a name. for a servant, but very, very occasional. So talk about going down like rabbit holes, because we were trying to figure out who is doing all this shopping. We know how, I can't remember the total number of people that were in the Fultz house, but he honestly was shopping almost every single day, or somebody from the household was shopping every single day. And please, both Nancy and I are teachers. Don't you dare wait. If you got a question or you see something, you just raise your hand and let us know right now. What were some of the weird things that came up? Shopping patterns, well, those were easy. Christmas. Yeah, you can tell who forgot to buy something. This store usually was open 6 days a week. They did close on Sunday, usually. And you see a lot of gift, like combs for your hair, gloves, things like that. You can tell they were obviously Christmas presents. Right before Thanksgiving, right before November and December, everybody who came in the store bought sacks of salt, because they're going to do what? They're going to butcher. You got that right. They're going to butcher. So you can always tell. And then the first sign of summer, you start seeing people coming in and buying lots and lots and lots of sugar and lemonade. So you can just picture what's happening at those houses, needless to say. That gives you a good. Now here's one, David Fultz, you can tell. Cash lent to pay Simpson for shoes. We have no idea who Simpson is, and trust me, we have looked. Again, these, and great photo of Judge Fultz there. Now, here is just to give you an idea how all this shopping works, because we're going to get you involved. You know, got to play Price is Right. Anyway, so back then, we're talking 1854. Pound of coffee was 17 cents. Package of seeds, 5 cents. Broom, 25 cents. Paper of pins, 25 cents. Handkerchief, 25 cents. I like to think it's easier for them to add. I think that's why they're 25 cents. But now, notice how it says 2, 2, 2. When you see TO, it means they're buying. It's you've come into the shop and you're buying from me. Buy means that's what you're bringing to bring your bill down. When it says BY, you're going to bring in 2 pounds of butter, and at the end of the day, I'm going to take 40 cents off your rather large bill that's been adding up. The most popular items to bring in to bring your bill down were butter and eggs. And as you can see here, butter was usually around 20 cents a pound. Eggs were about 10 cents. And so now you're thinking, wait a minute, what's this guy going to do with it? If you bring me butter and eggs, and you bring me butter and eggs, and you bring me, and you bring, what's he going to do with all of that? Well, what do you think he takes to Baltimore? That's what he's going to put on the train. He's going to take it to Baltimore, and he's going to use that wonderful Shenandoah Valley butter and those eggs to get what he needs to replenish in the store. Now we'll talk more about bartering. That wasn't all, but that's how you can bring your bill down before the big time when you have to pay. So, bartering. We saw that, Samson needed shoes. We know about the barter and we know about the eggs. Some of the other items, now the thing of it is, you had to agree with the owner of the shop. You couldn't just show up one day with a bunch of firewood and say, here, how much are you going to give me, and bring my bill down. Didn't work that way. You had to agree beforehand. And so just some of the items that were used, A load of wood could be anywhere from $2 to $3. I think it depended on the quality of the wood, and which makes a lot of sense, because if the store owner's in the shop all day long because it's open most of the day, when was he going to have time to chop wood? A gallon of oysters was $1.25. I was shocked to see this one. You don't see it very often, and the reason for that is Stanton had an oyster saloon, and it's not what it sounds like. It was where you could go and buy your oysters, and it was right next to the railroad. And so you could get them fried, steamed, whatever way you wanted. Some of the other items that were used for bartering. Oh yeah, when hunting season, when they went out hunting, 2 turkeys brought $1 off your bill. That's pretty good. If you had a really, really good wagon and some time on your hands, boy, could you bring your bill down. If you, I found this one 3 times, hauling seed to Stanton. Now, the one I was looking at, because it says to Stanton, this was from a ledger from Mount Solon, near Parnassus. And they were hauling the seed to Stanton. One time they got paid $2, one time they got paid $5. So the biggest barter, if you will, somebody brought in 6,000 shingles. Guess the guy needed a new roof, and he got paid, they took $24 off his bill. So yeah, a lot of times you will see pork or pork products brought in, different things like that. But again, I can't stress to you enough, the owner had to agree with you. Just some very bizarre things too, is that with this store, whoever was working there had the best handwriting and it was really easy to read, but something must have happened because they went through about a 3-month period and all of a sudden you might see a number, no name, no person, and no items, and then just an amount of money. And then you could tell that happened for a couple of days. And then the next week, somebody was writing, but you couldn't read their handwriting. So I think it was sometimes hard for him to find good help too. You know, some things just don't change, needless to say. Lorenzo Seibert, this guy really got around. Sometime if you ever go to Thornrose, he is buried there. He was the creator of, okay, Nancy, it just went onto my head.
Pacificator?
The Pacificator, thank you. The Pacificator. It is a gun that could have changed the Civil War because it was rapid firing and the plans got stolen and there were only 2 of them. And one of them is in the History of Museum and Culture in Richmond. But anyway, Lorenzo lived in Mount Solon. But yet he was working for different companies here in Stanton. And the weirdest thing is the first person in the Mount Solon ledger that Nancy and I worked with back in 1990 was Lorenzo Seibert. Then as we start working with the Bickle one, who's shopping there but Lorenzo Seibert? So he really gets around. He does get around.
What year is Mount Solon?
The Parnassus one, okay, it's a really sad story. That one was in the State Library in Richmond. We found it and it started right at the end of 1859 and it goes up to, you guessed it, April 1860 or so. And then all of a sudden it's not open very much. One of the last statements in that is it said, we closed the stores, we watched the boys march away today. And then we looked everywhere and we never found that the store reopened or we never found any more ledgers to that one. But because we really wanted to use that one to compare prices with the Bickle store, since that was our city and rural. But then Nancy was lucky enough to find some from Middlebrook, and that helped too, to compare the prices. And there really weren't too many, different. So as I said to you, it was a who's who. Yeah, Alexander H.H. Stewart. I think this man, and Nancy, help me out here again. Alexander H.H., somebody's got rid of that. Give a little background there on Alexander. Oh, I don't, I'm putting her on the spot.
Secretary of Department of Interior, wasn't he?
Yes, secretary under Millard Fillmore. And, who's who in Stanton, but he must have liked to throw parties, because here you see he's getting a lot of cheese there, 11 3/4 pound, and he's the one that held the record for, I can't begin to tell you how many lemons. So I think he liked to throw a lot of parties. All right, just a couple more shots. And again, we were on some back road. I didn't think we were ever going to get home because it was the tiniest, narrowest road. And this one was driving, and she would pull off, I'm not kidding, every 25 feet. She'd go, wait a minute, look at this one. It was obviously, and we were near, it was out by that.
McKinley?
Yes, McKinley. And there must have been, I can't tell you how many.
Go back to it.
Wait a minute, you saw something.
So Van Pelt's is right on the Rockingham, it's right on Route 11, Burketown. But this is really cool because obviously these guys have been hunting and fishing, and they probably took all that into the store and traded it. Because the ledgers show that they were taking a lot of country produce and hunting expedition things. What Linda was saying is that probably 3/4 of the transactions were cashless with the barter and going back and forth. It would be, again, we just keep reinventing history. There's nothing new, but we just keep repeating it. So we're into a cashless society now, but you just tap your card. Well, they just tap the ledger.
They did.
I remember the Burketown store as a young woman. My daddy played sit back up there with the dice
Really?
boys. Yeah.
So it was a place for gathering.
Yeah, a gathering. Yeah. Local.
Yep.
That was yours.
It was Arbor Hill's on the right and Middlebrook's on the left. But yeah, but we're challenging you all to go through, now that you're driving through Rockingham County, and look at all the places that obviously were stores at one time.
Oh, well, we'll leave those up, but now it's time to play Price is Right. And yes, we do have fabulous parting gifts, don't we, Nancy?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, of course we do. So anyway, we went through a lot of items. I know for the first one, you could buy these. I'm not going to tell you the price, but for this first one, Nancy, who can guess what this was? Oh, wait, we got a guess here.
The boat dish.
He gets a prize, Nancy. It is. I can tell you that no matter what school group we see, no kid has ever, and I wasn't sure either at first, but it is a bone dish. It went right at the top, because when you serve fish, you're expected to put them right in there. So he gets a prize there, Nancy, for his. What?
Do you get the bulletin? The Historical Society bulletin?
No.
Okay.
Oh,
So if you join the Augusta County Historical Society, this will be a perk of membership. But there you go. That's your prize.
all right. So now we'll do I know I don't look like Drew Carey or anything like that, but we'll do, I'll tell you higher or lower. So please just feel free to, guess away here. And, I had to bring books because, Nancy and I were both teachers. So I have a history book, plus I had a McGuffey's Reader, because one of those, Nancy, go ahead and click that off, because then I don't have to look at that light in my eyes. Anyway, one of the ads that Nancy had, it said, it was advertising, get your school, they didn't say supplies back then, but your school books. And believe it or not, even though this one is thicker, they were the same price. Who wants to start out the guessing? What? 25 cents. It is lower than 25 cents.
15 cents.
15 cents, it is lower than 15 cents. What?
8.
Higher than 8, lower than 15. It is higher than 10. You're getting, oh, who said 12? Oh, Joyce said 12. Nancy, Joyce would, well, and that's good because Joyce and I worked together at Verona Elementary, which is no longer. But anyway, we probably had books like that, didn't we, Joyce?
Yeah, canvas bookmark.
Yeah. Now, this is the one that really confused me for a bit, because I would have totally not gotten anywhere close to the actual price. You did go to the general store to get your spectacles, as they were called, and they just had them sitting there, and you kept trying them on until you found one that could let you read a little bit better. And so, as we start, what might be your guess for these lovely spectacles?
$1.
Lower than $1.
I think my mother said she gave 37 cents for her.
Oh, she got a bargain, honey, because these were more than 37 cents. More than 48. No, lower than 70. Lower than 52. Now you're getting close.
He said 62.
Oh, I heard 51, so let me just say, just a little lower, so. 50 cents, 50 cents for these. I mean, what a bargain to be able to see. So 50 cents there.
Who got that 50 cents?
It was in the back there. Now, you know, kids, and when you tell them to clear the table, they always drop something. So you could get the set, but you could also buy just your saucer or just your cup. But let's go for the set. How much for this nice? And most of the time it did say on the bottom, imported from England. What might your guess be? Don't let that imported from England scare you, though. Mm-mm. We're still talking the the Bickle store was 1854 to 1857. Yep. Any guesses?
I'd say 35 cents.
Boy, are you close. Lower than 35.
45 cents for a set of knives and forks.
This, lower than 35.
30.
Lower than 30. You're in the ballpark, though.
25.
You got it, 25. And they, like I said, they would sell them separately, so this one was 15 and 10, if you had to do it separately. You bet. Just so you know, to go back to your youth, though, I do want you to know, I won't make you guess these. They did have lots and lots of toys, because you had to make sure there was something for the kids to do while you're doing your shopping or getting your gossip. And so they did, of course, have the wooden Jacob's ladders. These usually were anywhere, because some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. They usually ran about 15 cents or so. Most of the toys they had were made from wood. You could get a porcelain-headed doll. Oh, now you're talking 50 cents, though. And they loved, of course, the spinning tops, but they had jacks, and this was for anybody. I used to say, my friend at Presidential Library said, stop saying for boys, girls can play marbles. I'm like, yeah. You could get a set of glass marbles with a shooter, 10 glass marbles plus shooter, for 25 cents, and they came in a lovely bag. However, even in Stanton, most of them were digging in the backyard, finding that good rich clay and just making their own clay marbles there. All right, How about we'll do just a couple more, one more. How much, because this is going to all change here real quick, because remember I said 1854. How much do you think for a pound of candles? And a pound of candles usually was about, they're estimating about 8 to 10 candles. How much for a pound of candles? Guesses.
30 cents.
Lower than 30. Lower than 25.
17 and a half.
What'd you say?
17 and a half.
Boy, give it to them, Nancy, because you got a pound for 17 cents. Exactly. And the cool part is, you heard Nancy mention kerosene. And so, again, looking through ledgers, you see fewer and fewer candles being sold and more kerosene and lanterns being sold. Just a couple, Nancy mentioned paper of needles. That's why they called it a paper of needles, because you told them how many you needed and they put it in some of that brown paper they normally use to wrap it up. Nancy, you mentioned our new thread. That's what the thread came in, and they had a beautiful case so you could go in and see the new colors. But what every kid wanted, penny candy, 2 for 1 cent.
And I've got a funny story from early 1900s. A lady wrote, she remembered going to the general store, and her friend came over to visit, and the two of them wanted to go to the general store and get some candy, so they begged their mom to give them an egg, so they could take the egg to the store and trade it for a piece of candy.
Yep, but you know, it's fun to find ledgers. It's fun to look through them. A great vocabulary, because boy, I had to learn a lot about, because in 1854, mostly the women going in are buying bolts of cloth to make their own clothes or have their clothes made, and then buttons and thread and lace and things like that. And then by 1857, we start to see more colors coming in. When they first went in 1854, it's all brown and black. But by 1857, we started to see some red and green being added in. So hopefully you all now know a little bit more about how general stores came to be, prices, and how to go out and find your own. But we do appreciate you letting us come and yammer on, Lucy and Ethel here. So.
We got one more nice bookmark. Let me ask one trivia question.
Okay.
What is the busiest shopping day of the year? For general stores, not for today. That's close.
The day after butchering.
No, that's probably a good one though. Christmas Day. Yep, the stores are all open Christmas Day. Yep.
Thank you so much. This
Any other
was,
questions?
yeah, well, let's find out if we
Yeah,
have some
books for sale.
questions. That's right. There are books for sale. Did anybody have a question? I'll start. If they took an egg in for a penny candy, was an egg worth a penny?
Well, I think in this little store that I got, they took one egg and they each got a piece of candy.
So could you tell from the ledgers that an egg was about worth two?
I could not tell them that because that was not associated with a ledger. It was just a story of, I remember going and begging my mom for an egg so we could run up to the store and get that. So time period, we're talking about 200 years of stores. So prices are going to change, but I don't know that. It would be interesting to do the Wilburger store. We have really complete records for a number of years of eggs and butter and poultry that are going to Richmond, mostly to Richmond and Baltimore, and it would be really interesting to kind of really get the prices.
Yeah,
The Wilburger store is rich. I mean, they were going to throw away these boxes of stuff, and they were a mess. I mean, all these pieces of paper were just jammed on this rusty wire, but I pulled them all out and organized them, and it was amazing.
But Joyce, you'll like this.
I think my training in being a teacher and then being a teacher for all those years helped me be able to translate my these ledgers because they don't spell very well.
Okay, I'm gonna come over here. Carter, you can be first.
You said that they would take eggs and things for other markets. How long do eggs last? I guess I'm showing my ignorance
Well,
here.
no, I think everybody thinks that eggs don't last long. You know, I used to actually, my first job out of college, out of Bridgewater College, was working in Kroger's. Because that's what history majors do, find whatever job they can get, right? And I got to really know all the produce people. Fresh eggs can be up to, what did they tell me? 90 days. I mean, the fresh eggs that you get in the store aren't fresh, so eggs will last.
You don't wash them.
Eggs, yeah, as long as you just pull them out and keep them, eggs will last a long time. So, and they also would sometimes seal them in lard and things like that to just seal them. So eggs, I mean, not indefinitely, but they last a long time.
And with the butter, if the owner knew you, that was great. But if somebody was unknown, a new guy in town, and they brought it in a crop, the store owner had a tool. It was a hollow metal piece like that called a butter borer, B-O-R-E-R. And he would take that and push it all the way down into the butter and then pull it out. And he was looking for color because it had gotten really, really dark. He's like, this is old butter. And he was smelling it because if he smelled onion or any kind of herbs in there, he knew it was old butter and this guy was trying to fool him. And so he said, yeah, thank you. You can keep your butter.
And the butter was heavily salted. And so actually the butter trade from the valley was huge. And it was going, by the mid 19th century, it was going to Richmond. It was going straight to Richmond, and it was going out the ports, and it was going down to the West Indies, to the Caribbean for the slave plantations down there. That's the main customer of all that heavy salted butter that came out of the valley was down in the West Indies. And it would be a year old because it was so salted. It would have been nasty stuff, but it, supported life.
I just had one anecdote and then another thing that I was wondering. So I was going through about turn of the century, the founder of Eastern Mennonite, it was three pieces of candy for 1 penny. And he only had 5 kids, so he would get a receipt for that third of a penny. When he gave them 2 pennies, only got 5 pieces. And then every third trip into town, he would redeem that receipt for a penny.
Oh, wow.
That's I thought that spoke into Eastern Mennonite somehow too. Pinching pennies. The other one I thought, I don't know if you ran across, I kind of ran across this, maybe in the 1890s, there was this running joke about the cat in the Cracker Barrel. Did you see this?
I did not, but tell it to us.
It was a common trope, I think. They said, it's better that the cat sleeps in there because it keeps the rats out.
Yeah. Well,
So, but that was the joke. If you're going to grab a cracker, you better move the cat.
that makes sense. And blow off the cat hair, I guess. Yeah.
Do we have another question? Oh, online? Yes. All right, great. All right. The automobile may have been the undoing of the general store, but didn't gas stations pick up some of the sales? I recall in the 1960s, the gas station selling a variety of goods.
They did, and some of the general stores also put in gas pumps. So kind of went both ways. I don't know, some of those pictures that we flipped up probably had gas pumps in the front of them because a lot of them, especially if they were on, once in the 1920s, you get the good roads movement where you had better roads like Route 11, became paved and they removed tolls. And so the general stores also became gas stations and tourist lodging and things like that. So yeah, it went both ways. And yeah, today's gas station convenience stores are sort of a remnant of that general store idea.
Mhm.
We don't have quite the variety.
But you can also tell sometimes they, like you just said, they maybe took off the front porch but kept that awning so that the cars could come underneath and the drivers were nice and dry in case it were raining or anything. And then the gas pumps were right there. So they still had the store, but they were full purpose. Like you say, who cares about Amazon? I mean, we had the general store.
My dad was from Pendleton County, Sugar Grove, and they had a store in Franklin that hired men, and they'd take in chickens certain days, and they had these 5 men that would pluck and dress your chickens. And I have photographs and a book about that. I worked in the poultry business for nearly 20 years, so I found that very interesting to find out that way back in West Virginia, they thought I had a poultry plant.
Well, and that makes sense because I know that like the Wilburger store and all was shipping a lot of chickens. And so refrigerated cars changed things a lot, but they would pack chickens in ice and ship them to the big cities too. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you so much. That's
Thank you.
Thank you, great question.
And I want to thank everybody for coming, and make sure that you're keeping in touch with the calendar. If you're not on our email list, we would be happy to add you so that you know what's coming up. And drive safely home. I hope everybody has a lovely, although damp, holiday weekend. Thank you.